Welcome to Lansing Bushcraft Adventures. This is episode, oh darn,
129, sir.
129. Just shy of 130. We're getting there, buddy.
Slowly but surely,
So,
right?
yeah, slowly but surely. And tonight we are going to talk a little bit about waterproofing and just, I guess, in general, keeping your gear dry and keeping yourself dry while out there. There's quite a bit to it. There's quite a plethora we can talk about. There's some things we're definitely going to concentrate on. And like always, sidetracks, sidebars, and
Rabbit holes,
pretty,
tangents, all the good stuff that we normally get into.
pretty well anything's going to go by the end of this. But we wanted to start the starting spot, and that's what we're going to go with. How are you doing, Robert? You got some of the background stuff straightened out?
Pretty much finished up now. Just sharing it on my personal page, and then we are good to go. If anybody's wondering, like normal, I came in like a hot mess and slowed things up. So, I'm carrying on the tradition.
Yeah, this is nothing if not by the seat of our pants, and that is how we live our lives. Uh, we love to trick ourselves into thinking we have a plan and a direction we're going on, but really, I think anyone who really thinks that is fooling themselves.
Well,
Life is about the moment.
we do have a general plan. We do have a direction. It's all the steps in between that generally come up kind of spades at one point or another. It just, life happens. I think it's good. I think the listeners that do listen to us can appreciate the fact that this is live, it's unscripted, and we're doing it around our lives. So I think if they can't appreciate, then, I mean, it is what it is, right?
If they can't appreciate us, they can go listen to someone else.
Hopefully they stick around. But yeah, I mean, I get it. But yeah,
The
so
reality is we're going to do this for free anyways.
exactly. I mean, we don't get paid, so. But
You guys are getting what you paid for. That is for sure.
hey, Steve. Hey, I'd rather be outside. Thanks for joining us here tonight. Once again, sorry for being a few minutes late there. Like I said, the little one had a little bit of a meltdown over a new product, and it had to be taken care of immediately. But anyway, it has now since been done. She's actually really quiet, as you notice. She hasn't been coming in to run around with me. But anyway, like Ben said, we're talking about waterproofing tonight. Maybe some do's, some don'ts, ideas, suggestions, experiences. And like Ben said, I think it's a good topic. Because if you go out in the woods, one of the major things that you're going to be combating at all times is trying to stay dry. And I mean, not just dry like rain, but I mean, if you go through any marshy areas, anywhere it's water, even the dew, you know what I mean, over the night. And where we slept at the bottom of the waterfall there, I mean, it was quite damp at all times.
Yeah. Um, yeah, for sure. And yeah, high humidity days, it's just hard to stay dry in those temperatures. In fact, when you get a place that's really humid, you just end up damp and you just never dry. And I mean, that can have a lot of negative effects on you. For one, it makes controlling your body heat damn near impossible. Uh, it can lead to making weakening your immune system, skin issues, uh, damaged gear, so on and so forth, damaged foods. So being able to keep yourself clean and dry is basically essential, and that takes basically a plethora of systems, equipment, and know-how. One of the interesting things, just for example, say you have a down sleeping bag and you're going on a long trip. Um, each night, a bit of moisture will tend to end up into your down sleeping bag. And if you're not able to dry it, by the end of the trip, you can actually get like 10, 15, 20% additional weight just from the moisture being held within that sleeping bag. And it's going to take, not only is that additional weight, but it takes down its insulation capability. So that sleeping bag is no longer going to be as warm as it was on day one. And unless you figure out how to dry it out, it's a downward trend.
Yeah. And if you're staying for any amount of time, like, it's one thing if you're going for an overnighter. You know what? you can last that out. But if you're planning to do like a trail hike, something like that, where you're going to be 2, 3, 4, 5+ days, like that really starts compounding and starts adding problems. Not only do you get the additional weight if you're trying to do ultralight, you got that extra weight to carry around with you. But as you said, it kind of breaks down the thermal value of that as well a little bit. So if it's getting colder, especially the kind of weather we're coming into, where it's fairly warm in the day, but it could potentially cool off at night. And I mean, think of like October, November here in Nova Scotia. Pretty easy to get 15, 20 degrees. The odd day comes up, but then it could literally drop to 0 or under overnight. And that's getting more and more and more common for this neck of the woods. And I think you'll find that's getting more and more common for basically our height along our, what would it be, longitude
Yeah.
around the globe.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's actually
Latitude?
basically the latitude or
Yeah,
whatever
latitude, yeah.
latitude that a lot of people in North America live. Like a lot of even the states live along our general latitude. Give or take a few hundred feet, and Canadians. So it's something to keep in mind. So I think the very first thing I want to bring up is before you even get to waterproofing is what kind of materials are you using and why. So start off with, I mean, we all love them, natural materials. You got your wools, your cottons, so on and so forth, like materials that have been around forever and are tried and trusted, and everyone tends to love them. What are the issues with these? Cotton, wool, they hold moisture. They get heavier. Wool, on the bright side, holds about 80% of its heat value even when it's wet. So that's awesome for wool. But wool is thick and heavy and has its downside. Great for winter gear, but if it does get wet, it will hold that moisture, and it's going to take a bit to dry it out. So, I mean, just keep that in mind. Cotton, same idea, except its insulation values doesn't maintain that 80%.
And it
I'm
actually
not
has a wicking effect. As it gets wet, it could potentially cool you down because off the wicking effect, like that's why lamp wicks and stuff like that, they're generally cotton material because they will wick the moisture up and out. And basic biology, as we perspire and that evaporates, it takes heat with it, and cotton is
yeah,
just adding to that.
yeah. So I mean, that's both its advantage and its disadvantage simultaneously. I'm in some conditions you definitely want that wicking effect. In hot, drier climates, with that wicking effect will actually help cool you down, maintain the temperature. But in a lot of other situations, that can be an issue. Um, and if it's a damp situation, like I think everyone has done this. You walk with a pair of jeans through grass or snow or whatever. The bottom gets wet. Next thing you know, you're sitting down, your knees are soaked because it wicks all the way up the leg, you know. And now and if you've been out in the winter, it freezes solid like a sheet of ice. So, one of the things like they really push in search and rescue is not to wear jeans, cotton pants. They want you wearing the polyesters, the I know there's various um, materials, but basically they don't really hold moisture. As soon as they hit, they tend to beat off. And
Mm-hmm.
if the weave is light enough, they allow you to breathe. So even when they do get wet, they tend to dry off really quickly, and they avoid that. So there's a strong case. I mean, new modern materials have an advantage.
Merino wool is naturally moisture wicking, not itchy like traditional wool, flame retardant, antimicrobial, doesn't end up smelling, and great for temperature regulation, which is a comment that came from Alex. And
Yep.
somebody had mentioned this in a previous episode as well, this merino wool. And we did a little bit of a conversation on it then, and I kind of forgot about it right up until you mentioned it now, Alex, and that's exactly right. And it is a great product, and it's fairly inexpensive for what you're getting, if I remember correctly. I mean, it's not
It's
cheap,
no.
but what you're getting out of it.
I actually look for merino wool, especially like when I'm thrift shopping, and that's one of my favorite places to pick up some of my kit and gear and stuff. Because if you can save a few bucks, why not, right? Um, I'll oftentimes go to like the sweater area in the thrift stores and just go through and pick it up. And I'll go through and like 90% of the sweaters you're going to find are cotton sweaters.
Hmm.
Like they look like wool, but they're not. They're cotton. And then you find a handful that are wool, and every now and then, one in 100 you'll find is actually a merino wool style, or you'll find a decent wool blanket if you're into blanket areas. And I do love them. Like they're great materials. I do enjoy them, and I do look for them. And merino socks. I've bought merino wool socks, uh, varying percentages at both Walmart and Costco for a really good price. Like you can get it if you look around, shop around and look. Uh, and then you can buy some of the higher, more expensive brands. And the neat thing with them, some of them even come with like a lifetime warranty.
Yeah, and another place I was going to add on to that is a lot of the Army Navy surpluses. You can pick up blankets and stuff because I know I've gotten a few of them there myself, especially if it's overstock. Are you getting them as the cost of thrift shops? No, but you're still getting them for a relatively reasonable price. Once again, considering what you're getting, I'm not talking like you're getting this for $5, $10. Like you're going to pay some money. Don't misunderstand, but for what you're getting out of the money you're putting in, the return is actually pretty well worth it.
Yeah. So definitely a product to look for. It has a lot of advantages. It definitely has that warmth factor. Um, and it's a good durable product. We'll probably come back to it a little bit later. Like I said, I started mentioning some of the more, space age ones, and another one that comes to mind is the Gore-Tex. You remember,
Mm.
everyone loved that because it tended to stay dry. It kept water out, but it still was supposed to be somewhat breathable. My experience, and it's somewhat limited, I've only had a few products for true Gore-Tex, is it didn't breathe as good as they claimed.
No, I've had a few pair of Gore-Tex socks. I bought into it. They were okay. I had one pair of real good Gore-Tex boots that I loved. They were
Yeah,
STGs or STCs or something like that. They were expensive as bloody old heck, but they were great.
yeah,
Uh, but yeah, the socks themselves, like the materials in those, not so great. Honestly, much like you said, that they were okay.
yeah,
Probably better than cotton, but
yeah,
I was expecting more. I think.
yeah. I definitely think the ones I've seen were better than cotton because they did, like if you get splashed, they tended to stay dry. Where cotton, they were wet.
Hmm.
Like, you could walk in a puddle with Gore-Tex and be somewhat okay. You might get a little damp, but with cotton, you're
So
soaked. Yeah, like, it's going to get all the water. Um, So yeah, we could talk a bit about that, and then of course you have, and we've talked about this on multiple episodes, so I'm not going to go too far. It's just actual waterproof gear, so stuff that's waterproof. And we've always said, and not changing anything here, anything that's truly waterproof, you're still going to get wet
yeah.
because if it's waterproof, water isn't getting out. So your body's always releasing moisture. You put something truly waterproof on your body, and you're going to be damp inside. Like, there's no getting away from
Pitcher wearing a garbage bag. Will water come in? Most likely not, except around, whatever hole you put in for your arms and head, and that's why they make great ponchos. But in weather like today, for instance, where it's relatively warm, 28 degrees, humidity's up there, it's high, it's like 80% or something like that,
it.
you
Yeah.
might as well be standing under a rainstorm. And that's kind of something you got to remember as you're going along with this whole waterproofing topic. The more waterproof you make it, if you get 100% waterproof, especially if it's clothing or something like that, it's just going to sweat a little bit. Or you're going to sweat a little bit, and it's not going to allow that moisture to escape, is more the important point on that.
Um, and then you get down to I mean, you can get leathers and stuff, and I love leather and even like maybe furs and stuff. But again, shy of like winter, when are you going to wear furs in the woods? I mean, it looks cool, but um, it has its limitations. And leather, if unless properly treated, actually can kind of fail when it gets wet. And I have quite a few leather products, and I spend a lot of time like waterproofing it, like with natural oils, waxes, different products like that. Um, and eventually, I think we will talk a little bit about that. But again, that's not a product that you see a ton of outdoors people wearing. It's like a lot of leather gear, other than your boots and gloves. Uh, leather jackets, and definitely like you don't
Mm.
see that outside as much. Um, but is the and correct me around the I want to say oil skiing or duck something.
Well, I have an oilskin hat,
Yeah.
and I can tell you, much like the weather, like you're saying, how long have I had it now? I'm going like 4 years with it, maybe almost 5 years, and it's just starting to give out now. So I actually don't have a whole lot bad to say about the oilskin
Oh no.
hat. So it's good, but it's hot. Once again, all this stuff, as you add more waterproofing, it generally makes it a little bit more hotter in the hotter temperatures and stuff like that. Because once again, not as much stuff's evaporating out, and that is a crucial thing to keep in mind, especially if you're expecting to like take your coat, your hat. Well, maybe not your hat, but like your coat, your pants, and like, give it the old waterproofing, and that's all good and dandy and stuff. But the old adverb, if you sweat, you die kind of deal. Same kind of thing. So if you 100% waterproof stuff, especially around the winter, it's great to keep the snow out, great to keep slush out, but then you're going to sweat. It's going to get bad.
Yeah, the word I was looking for, like waxed canvas jackets and stuff, that was
Mm.
really popular for hunting and stuff, and it almost has a leather look and feel to it. But it's canvas or wax. Like when you see it from a distance, it kind of has that feel, and it has a lot of advantages, like a nice thick cotton. It's a very durable, very sturdy product. Being waxed, it's basically waterproof with still some ability to breathe. They're very popular, and they still actually are very common. They've been around for years, and you can kind of do it yourself. But when you buy like the pre-done products, you're definitely going to get something that's probably done to a little better standard than you can generally do at home. I've done a jacket that way. I took an old military jacket and waterproofed it myself, and I think it looks cool as hell. But it took like 2 years for it to properly dry.
And that's kind of the drawback with some of doing, not all, but some of the methods of home waterproofing that we're going to talk about here in a few minutes.
Yeah,
The drying times can really have an effect on some of them. And one I'm thinking off is like linseed oil, and some people just use straight linseed oil.
yeah,
Or the linseed oil and paint thinner, or whatever you want to use in there, mineral spirits, some sort of thinning agent or evaporative agent. One, you're using an organic compound, so you got to make sure spontaneous combustion. And two, you have an organic compound that has a very heavy smell to it, and you're mixing it with another chemical that has a very potent smell to it, and you got to find some place to hang this, and then you got to make sure it's 100% dry before you fold it and put it away. But anyway, we'll come back to that.
well, and you mentioned something there. I think we may have talked a little bit about this in tarps at one point, because you can buy like a good cotton tarp, like a drop cloth style thing, and do that. And some people have made the mistake of treating it, folding it up, putting it away, and it actually will start to smolder and catch fire on its own, like just its own action. You have to actually keep it pretty well spread out and cool so it doesn't heat up. Because if you fold it up, the heat it builds up in itself. It will be enough to ignite itself. So it's kind of
And it happens, like, people are probably snickering a little bit, but it actually happens more often than you think. Ask anybody, well, depending on the area you're in, I guess, if you know a hay farmer, ask them about it. I can guarantee you any hay farmer that's done any amount of hay has either had a bale in a field start to smoke on them, or has had hay in a loft or something start to smoke on them. And what it is it gets damp, it's not 100% dry, and anything organic, as it breaks down, it produces heat. And it starts breaking down, it's in a confined area, it's got nowhere for that heat to go, it just keeps building up, and eventually spontaneous combustion. Interesting subject if anybody wants to look that up.
yeah. I actually had a job one time. This is a tiny bit off subject, but it is down the road. Working at a dump, and one of the things we had was a composting area. So all anything that was compostable got sent there, and there was these long troughs. I think they were 150 foot long or something. And they had a machine that used to churn them up. It used to run down a set of tracks. There was 5 or 6 of these tracks. And they actually ran cold water underneath to control the temperature because it got so hot. And when you went and work in that room, there was no heating in this big concrete room in the middle of the winter. It was hot enough you could be out there in like a t-shirt if you wanted. Like,
Hmm.
no problem. It was hot and humid constantly in that room. And they tried everything they could to keep the temperature like controlled down. Like so yeah, any organic material breaking down can build up a huge amount of heat. But yeah, I mean, there's one of the products is sort of like your cotton, wax cotton or oiled cotton. It's a neat material. It's a very popular material in a lot of areas. I think even like in the 1800s and stuff, that was a very popular jacket for hunters and fishermen and stuff. So still popular today, still sought after, even in the fashion industry. So even outside of the practical use, it still has its place.
Oh, incredibly durable. But one of the big drawbacks to it is the weight. Any kind of waxed cotton or oiled cotton or any of those wax canvas materials, generally they're going to have a little bit more weight than some of their synthetic counterparts. And I think that's just technology catching up with it. I mean, you can get. I'm thinking tarps specifically. Like the only experience I've had with making a decent waterproofing, and I say decent, quote unquote, with the linseed oil and the mineral spirits, like I was talking about, was I was trying to make a tarp.
Yeah.
Just used I think it was Egyptian cotton. It has a high thread count, it's pretty tight weave, king size sheet. Found it at Value Village. It was like, I don't know, $10, something like that, because it was Egyptian cotton, king size, yada, yada, yada. Anyway, 50% linseed oil to mineral spirits, dunked it, worked it in good. I've even heard of people putting a little beeswax in there, as we did have from the comments here. I'd rather be outside, treats his canvas with beeswax, linseed oil, and a paraffin paraffin wax. I mean, there's different combinations, and you can do your research. Actually, we'll talk about a little of them there. But I've seen iron powder go in and different things like that to make it iron cloth, which has some fire resistance, and it's heavy. That's the real big drawback to this tarp, and why I don't use it that often, is it is incredibly heavy for some of its synthetic counterparts. Now, this king size sheet, couple pounds easy when it's packed up in my bag, and it takes a lot of space. It's bulky. It doesn't compact down well. Now, the tarp that I take with my hammock and such, it's a synthetic material, and it's waterproofed with a silicone-based water sealant, and it packs down super light, super small, and it's nicer that way. But that's not saying that the canvas material isn't good in its own right. Like I said, it does have that fireproof feel to it, or, well, not feel to it. It does have that fire resistance characteristic to it, as where with the tarp that I normally travel with, like, one little spark's going to melt a hole in it if it doesn't set it on fire, kind of deal. So there are trade-offs, and these are things to keep in mind as you're going about doing your waterproofing. I notice you got something there, Ben.
Yeah, so I mentioned I did do a jacket, and this jacket, I mean, it looks filthy, and it is, because it's slightly sticky from the wax. But I did about the 50/50 linseed oil wax, and I think I used the wax from a toilet bowl ring because somebody had suggested it's a good solution. And I think those are like half beeswax, half paraffin to begin with, and you can pick them up for $5-10 at the hardware store. And I did a superb job of really impregnating this, and the change in the material is unreal. Like it feels nothing like it used to. It feels almost like waxy, but it still has, after almost 5 years and a handful of wearings, because I really have no practical place to wear this. It's kind of ridiculous. Halloween's my favorite time to wear it. It still has a slight stickiness to it, and it's still not fully 100% dry. So there's a whole science to getting that right, so it really works. And I hung that out. I just left it on a clothesline for like 3 weeks. It rained on it, it blew on it, the sun baked it. Nothing seems to hurt. It's basically indestructible.
Yeah, but
Um,
as you said, it still kind of has that tacky feeling to it at all times.
yeah.
And that could have been a
But you,
result of the wax you used, like you said, with and maybe not. Maybe it's characteristic of it. More testing would be required. Redneck testings. There was a comment that people would like to see some more Redneck science. Sorry. So we may start doing a little bit more redneck science because I got some great ideas for redneck science. Ben and I have already been talking about it. Just one little idea I had today that is going to completely be redneck science to a hilt. But yeah. If you guys want to see more redneck science, I'm dedicated to not goofing around because honestly, we call it redneck science, but there is things to learn from this. We're just doing it on a budget in the craziest ways that you can actually imagine sometimes.
If it works,
It's not
it's not
crazy.
wrong. Yeah.
But yeah, the
I
coat is incredibly waterproof. You can tell just by looking at it. But yeah, how's that tackiness? That's a question I have for you. If you were to wear that in the woods, would it pick up like needles and stuff like that, or would they still brush off? It's just more of a dirt you would have to worry about.
Dust sticks to it. Needles and stuff, not so bad. And honestly, like if it did, like you could definitely just hose it off. Like it's not a problem. I actually think, I mean, we could test that. You could probably, other than that, I didn't waterproof the inner layer, so there's like a liner to it. It's a permanent liner. You can't pull it off.
Hmm.
I didn't waterproof that, so you have this dry layer in between that kind of allows it to wick away from your body, and then it does work well. Um, but yeah, you could drop that in a river, and it pretty well stays dry. You can pick it up, and it just beads off like Rain-X on a windshield. You know what I mean? Like it just sheets right off. Uh,
Now, on a wearing perspective, how do you find that for sweating and stuff? I assume like this time of year, it's obviously a no-no because it's just too freaking hot anyway. But come fall, when it's a little cooler, do you have to regulate your temperature a little bit more? What's the word I'm looking for? You have to pay a little bit more attention to it, or can you just go about your day and?
I haven't, but I would only really wear it when it's relatively cold. So it's something you'd put on in the evening, in the fall. You might get away with it during the day in a really wintry day if it wasn't too cold. So it is kind of a shoulder season item, and its aesthetic is probably as powerful as it is practical. So if you really want to freak someone out, you put that on, and it just has the creepiest look to it because it kind of has that military vibe with this sort of homeless man feeling. uh, it adds a creepiness to it. That is. I had one kid walk up to me. I was wearing it one time, and he looked at his mom. And he said, "That man's giving me nightmares."
But
So
I mean, it's a great example of some home
yeah,
waterproofing that is functional. It was fairly cost effective. You had the coat and the other items, I assume, the linseed oil and the wax ring. Like you said, the wax ring wasn't that expensive. Linseed oil, depending on where you buy it and the quantities, I mean, the price varies there, but it's still cheaper than going and buying a fully waterproof coat from a new retailer.
yeah. All in, I was probably under $20 in materials, and that includes like. And I think I've talked to you about this before. I don't know if we've talked about it on air, but I had an old pot that I wasn't really using, and I put everything in. I melted it down, and I sat there. And when I got it hot, and that was like the hardest thing is you got to get the wax for this kind of liquidy, and then you just sort of paint it on. You're just painting it on, and then sort of letting it absorb. And then I sat there with a heat gun putting it on. That was the only way to really get it in there, and I may have gotten it in a little thick. I got to admit to that. Uh,
But that's something that's good to allow our listeners to be aware of. There is the potential for oversaturation with something like this.
Definitely, and I intended to do that because I wanted that sort of like that sheen, that solid, like yeah, it definitely changes. It gives a sort of a very rugged feel and look to it, and it always looks kind of wet. If that makes sense.
Hmm.
Um, and I do hope to get to use it a bit more, just play with it and see what it will give me. I got a bit of distraction. The wife just brought some of the birds in.
I just heard them go by there. But you know where this would actually work really well is, and Steve had mentioned it a little earlier here in the comments, and I want to loop back to it, and this is a great spot to come back to it. If you were doing like canvas, and actually I'd rather be outside, said it a little too, because he said your eyeball in his cook bag. something like the canvas bags and things like that, this would still be a great application for that. For the coat, it's good for winter and stuff like that. It repels water, maybe a little sticky, things like that. But if you used it on like a dry bag kind of situation or a canvas bag, waterproof the outside of that, I mean, it's not like you got to worry about yourself sweating from the inside out. But everything that's in that bag or pack is going to be a lot better off and a lot drier, because the beauty of these kind of impregnated materials is even the humidity that you get and the dew you get and things like that, they tend not to penetrate it. They tend to stay outside of it. I know my old chainsaw bag. It was just a canvas bag, and I waxed the outside of it with basically some beeswax and just melted it in with a hair dryer. Very common spot for people to start when they're doing waterproofing. And honestly, it beaded water. I lost it in the woods, and I imagine if I went and found it, it's probably still beating water to this day.
Yeah.
And then, of course, once the chain oil and stuff seeped through, it even made it even better. But for something like that, it was great. And anything I put inside it, if you wrapped it up and, not a lot of air could get in, like I said, I leave that in the woods overnight. That's how I lost it. I threw it down beside a wood pile. And honestly, it might be there. It might have walked away. I thought I left it in a certain spot. But it was very common thing to just drop the gas can, the chain oil, the chainsaw bag, and you just kind of hide it behind something when you're cutting wood and stuff like that, and everything that was in there stayed good. And I mean, chain files and stuff like that, they pick up moisture really quick. They start to rust really quick. And I never had any problems with that.
Yeah. No, it's a great method, and it has a look and a feel to it that's hard to beat. Because you mentioned a bit there about like it does add a bit of weight. Like a canvas bag that's waterproof weighs a bit more than maybe a synthetic version of it, because you can get a nylon bag that's basically waterproof that weighs a fraction and probably can hold as much weight. But here's the difference: when you get that nylon bag and you get a rip in it, it's ruined.
Hmm.
You get that cotton bag and it gets a small rip in it, you can sew it up and it's not really affected much.
Because you could reseal that seam.
Yeah. Uh, where the nylon is, yes, you can try to sew that up, but the repair is never as good. It's never as strong, and it's not as resistant to that damage. That's one of the things is it strong? Yes, like it'll hold a ton of weight. You can basically a good nylon bag, you can tie it up and tow a car with it. Uh, but it doesn't have the same durability in another way. Like it tends to be punctured and torn easier with like rough abuse, where cotton absorbs that, may not have that shear strength. That not shear is
Tensile strength?
tensile. Is it tensile?
Like pulling?
Yeah, yeah.
Tensile strength.
Yeah, it doesn't quite have that tensile strength. So it's just different ways that it works.
And
right?
nylon's very susceptible to heat. You get it too hot, it melts, destroys it.
So I bought, I mean, some of my favorite pants that I had owned was a set of Wind River zip-offs, like the they turn to shorts and long pants. And I love those for camping because it means I have one pair of pants that serves two functions. I can have shorts when I want and I can turn them back into pants. And they were all synthetic material. And you're right. Every time a spark fell off the fire and like shot across, it hit your pants, there was a hole, like instantly, just gone. And they looked pretty bad relatively quick. I was really disappointed in them.
But that's the trade-off. Lighter materials, synthetic. That's the problem with synthetic materials in general. Kind of bringing this all the way around is synthetic materials, they tend to be lighter, they tend to be just as strong, and they tend to have just as waterproof. But the downside is, while their tensile strength may hold up, they're generally going to be a little more susceptible to punctures, rips, tears, and definitely heat. Most synthetic materials, they're KO'd by any source of actual open flame. Like, just ruins them. Even polyesters and things like that. Do they burn? Not so much. Like, they don't actively produce flame so much, but they do melt. A polyester blanket, like, it's just going to melt, which is something to be aware of too, because that melting could potentially melt into your skin. So just be very aware of that and where you're using certain things. Just word of safety.
So, I think all those products, so every product has its time and place. Like I love my synthetic materials for my hammock. I can't imagine having a cotton hammock that can do what I can do with my synthetic one. Because it is lightweight and it's strong and it has that waterproofness that really helps if it gets splashed up and whatever. My tarps, I love my lightweight tarps. I really do. But my tarps aren't pressed right against my skin, so when I sweat, it's not trapping that moisture. What it is sitting above me. Does it have its disadvantages? Yeah. If they're into the direct flame, they could be hurt. Um, if I had to build one where I had to have a fire in or close to it, I'd much rather have a cotton one that's treated because that odd spark of flame is really not. It's going to take intense flame to get that to light,
Oh
and
yeah.
once it lights, it might go up like a candle, but it's going to take a lot more to get it there.
Coming back to that tarp I made out of the cotton and stuff, I literally held a lighter on it for 20 seconds and it didn't burn. Like it kind of charred, turned brown and got a little crispy, but it didn't actually burn. It's a great tarp for. I shouldn't say I held it on that tarp. I did a piece of material along with it for testing purposes. Redneck science again. But anyway, yeah, that tarp is great for doing like low level shelter sets where you have a fire or something real close to you. Because if sparks and stuff fly in, doesn't hurt it in the slightest. The indirect radiant heat doesn't really bother it. I mean, maybe if you threw it right over the fire. And that's the other thing. I'm convinced that tarp, if I had to, for whatever, who knows what the reason is, but I guarantee you I could take that, throw it over a fire, and it would smother it out
Oh
before it
yeah,
burned through it. Well, depending on the fire, I guess. Everything burns if it gets hot enough.
everything burns with enough heat.
Exactly. But,
Redneck science right there, buddy.
but yeah,
Uh,
so, oh, sorry, go ahead, Ben.
I was going to say, are we going to let out a little secret here? Is that the plan?
I was just about to say, we kind of talked about materials and a few other things, so let's get to the meat and potatoes of the subject, which is actual ways of waterproofing. Waterproofing. I don't know why I'm so tongue tied tonight, but anyway. So there are some different ways that you can do waterproofing, and we talked about a few of them. We'll talk about them a little bit more in some depth. But what brought this all along was we actually do have a product that was sent to us, our first product for testing in this method. And we were talking about it, and we thought it'd be a good follow up for this. But Ben has the product there. He was doing some testing. We're doing a review on it. And what it is, it's Kingfisher Canvas Wax. And so far, actually, you know what, Ben? I'll let you speak a little bit on it because honestly, you have been dealing with it directly. And from what you tell me, it's a pretty good product so far.
So far, I'm pretty impressed with it. It is a neat little product, and we are giving. I am starting, and Robert's seen part of it. I'm still reviewing it, and it's taking some time to do it right and give it just cause. And I'm giving it some comparison, but it comes in a neat, nifty little package. It's a 2 ounce package we were given, um, and it's made from local beeswax and natural tree waxes oil. So it's supposed to be all natural product, and it comes in this nice little cardboard tube. Uh, and it actually smells decent. I actually kind of like it. Not flowery or pretty, but just a, a
Beeswax
mild.
kind of has a waxy sweet scent to it anyway. So,
Yeah. So we have it, and we've been testing it. And what I came up for, and I'm going to sort of probably give in to maybe a little bit of stuff. I have these little canvas sacks that I'm going to play with because, like we mentioned, little canvas bags are great and for something small. So that's what I'm playing with. And beeswax, one of its products, is something that's recommended for a lot of especially natural tents or anything that's been sewed together. That's one of the best things you can seal up seams. There's a little bit of beeswax just running around the seams, and water will bead up off it. You can buy the silicone stuff, especially for your synthetics. You can do the same thing. You can get a silicone and paint it on. But if you're looking for um, natural products, beeswax is pretty well the equivalent, and it really doesn't add any weight or any effort to it. And it's great to carry in your pack something like this because you can, on fly, do quick little repairs.
and
Uh,
you said one key thing that I just want to loop back to is seams. a lot of people have waterproof stuff and they don't realize that the seams generally come up as the weakest part of that. Even with good tents and stuff like that, the seams are generally going to be the first place it's going to leak. Simply because you have two overlapping pieces of material, it's stitched through, there's a lot of give there where water can kind of seep its way through. That's why you should be treating your seams and stuff like that on your tarps, your tents, clothing, packs. It's just good habit. Perfect product for something like that.
So, and since we mentioned seams, I do want to say something. Like if you're buying a tent, a tarp, any product, it's oftentimes considered, and it's not a given, a sign of a slightly better product if the seams come pre-sealed.
Hmm.
And you'll see it because a lot of times what they'll do is there's a seam sealer they put in between the materials and then they sew it up and it seals inside of it. If they don't do that and you have to do it, you're painting on the outside. You're trying to work around that. And it's a little harder to get it perfectly sealed. Now, I have seen some pretty big brands. I think I'm not going to name any names because I could be wrong, but at least like some higher brands, like close to $1,000 tents, that didn't have it done, and they actually admit to it when they sell it to you, and they say we do it because then it gives you the option to seam seal it with what you want. Personally, I like to see a company seam seal to begin with. I don't want to have to open up a product and do 2, 3 hours worth of work to it to use it.
No, and I agree. I think that even if they had put some sort of minimal seam sealer in there, I can still go over it and reseal it with a product of my choosing if I want to. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So,
Plus, I would expect a manufacturer would know what the best product for their product is and use that rather than have me try to figure it out. Um, but I mean that's personal preference. I'm sure there are people who are considered way better at this stuff than I am that would argue with me till they're black and blue, saying they know better and they would much rather do the product themselves. Yeah, who might argue with those people?
and that's the thing. There's always two sides to every story. There's two sides to every coin. But coming back to the Kingfisher product there, or Kingfisher, Fisher King, Kingfisher, Fisher King, something completely
Kingfisher.
different. Um, it's just kind of a roll-on product, is it not? And like I said, I did see the video, but it's just kind of a roll-on. The directions, I believe, is like you just heat up, apply, and then reheat.
It's solid wax, a solid tube of wax. You're right. You just push it on and sort of rub it on, back and forth motion. It says. What I did with it was I did try to preheat my product a little bit, rubbed it on, and then heated it. And when you heated it, it just you could see it sort of turn liquidy. It looked wet and then absorbed and sort of locks the fibers down. And honestly, you can do it with other products. I tried it with just paraffin wax. I've done it with other products. Uh, Getting the mixture right takes a bit of effort. Too much of just like pure paraffin wax tends to get hard and brittler. Uh, Beeswax has its expense, and maybe it's not. It sort of has a stickiness. So you're trying to get that right mixture. Um, and if you're trying to think about what I'm talking about, have you ever seen the all natural like Ziploc bags?
Hmm.
You can buy these beeswax bags. They're like sandwich bags, and they put the beeswax on it really thick, and you can actually seal the bag just by pushing the wax together. It kind of seals itself. You just fold it over and fish, and it's really neat. Great product for woods, and it'll do the same thing. It'll keep your food fresh and dry and protect it. And they say food will stay in it quite good for quite a while. That's almost 100% beeswax. That's why it always has that slight tackiness to it.
Well, I think beeswax on its own, and I could be wrong on this. Somebody could correct me, but beeswax has a slight antibacterial property to it in its raw form anyway.
I believe so, yeah.
And I think that helps with a lot of odor control and things like that. So beeswax is a great way to start with doing your waterproofing. You can get a pre-made product like they have there. You can buy blocks of natural beeswax on Amazon. They're fairly inexpensive, but then when you're buying the pure raw beeswax, generally you need to cut that down with something, be it a thinner or I mean you could put it on whole, I guess, but then you're going to end up somewhat like the tackiness that Ben had on his coat there, because it has nothing to evaporate that extra layer off. And like Ben said, it might be oversaturated. But anyway, you get the beeswax. You could cut it down with. I've heard everything from rubbing alcohol to mineral spirits to paint thinners. I mean, there's a bunch of stuff out there. Mineral spirits, I know once it evaporates, it's a little bit cleaner than some of the other products out there. Not to say that when it's in its liquid form, it's not, maybe a little aggressive, but any case, that's the one I'm familiar with, and it works good. And I have heard of doing the toilet ring wax as well. I've never heard anyone that's actually done it. I've seen it out there. It's interesting that you used it. I'd be curious to try and do it with the beeswax as well as paraffin wax and see if there's any difference between the tackiness, the durability, and stuff like that. And I think we're going to look into that a little bit with some of our product testing. That was some of the redneck science we were talking about there, and hopefully we can simulate some circumstances. But I don't want to tip our hat too much on that one yet. What else have you heard with the beeswax? I'm sure you must have heard a few other things that you can mix with beeswax to make it apply a little bit.
I feel like I've heard of like olive oils and stuff too been used, and it depends on what you're doing it with. I bought a product years ago. I think it was called 11 or something. I can't Super 11 or Super something, and it was for leather products, and I loved it. Like I used to put on my work boots and all that, and it didn't really dry up, but it was almost had the feel of I want to say Vaseline, but it was supposed to be an all natural beeswax and something else mixture. And it was good because you could put it on the leather and it would absorb into the leather and it pretty well wiped off the excess wood. It didn't
Mm.
stick on. Like, if you ever tried putting Vaseline on something, it just never goes away. Like,
And
it's
there's
hard to
advantages
keep.
to that as well. For those wetter, tackier substances, they do have a self-healing property to them. So if you were to take a big scratch, and I don't mean like an actual puncture, but like a scratch where it removes some of the material, where it is a little tacky, it generally will reflow back into that. Not immediately. It's not like, going to run right down and cover that in or everything would drip off. But over time, it's probably going to be self-sealing. So any of those little damages and things like that, it'll probably give you a little bit more longevity out of it. But the trade around is the tackiness. And something that I'd rather be outside said here is keep in mind with beeswax bought online, if you are also looking for that nice beeswax smell, most of the stuff online does not have much of the scent, but the local providers tend to do a lot better, and that's because of the bulk ordering and stuff like that. They're mass producing these big blocks of beeswax, so they reheat it up, pour it in molds, and a lot of time that sweet smelling scent will it's almost an impurity. It's leftover honey and stuff like that, and royal jelly and crap that gets in it. And once again, not a bee farmer. Don't get me wrong, but I think from what I've been told by beekeepers, it's like a lot of the residual stuff that's in the hive makes it into pure raw beeswax, as where the mass-produced stuff gets cooked off a lot because they're just slamming so much of it in a pot. They're basically bringing it to a boil, shooting it into molds, quick cooling them, flipping them off, and moving on. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great product, and each of those like versions have levels of impurities and stuff. It's just going to affect what its best uses are, and you have to figure that out for yourself. I mean, we're by no means experts, um, but it's a really fun thing to play with and see. But there's definitely something to be said for coming up with a good product. And there's a few things I definitely want to try with this. This has really opened up, uh, not my eyes because I've been doing this for a little while, but opening up some thought process of things I want to test it against and see what I like. But, you know, and I'm not pushing this product, but I do like the form factor.
And as the testing goes on, we are going to release those videos, and hopefully you folks will get to see some of that too. Like I said, this is just a
Yeah.
hint of things to come. The other thing I wanted to say, as it just popped in my head, is beeswax is great for natural materials like the cotton and stuff like that. You can use it on synthetics. It's not optimal for synthetics. There's other products that go more towards synthetics, which would be like your silicone-based products. Silicone-based tends to go better towards your synthetic materials. So if you have like a nylon tarp or something like that, I've heard of people literally taking like silicone caulking Same stuff
Yeah.
you buy at a hardware store. You basically split the tube or force it all out into a bucket or whatever, and you cut that down with your mineral spirits or paint thinner or whatever, and then you paint that on. You let it dry in such the same way. Once again, where it's not organic, you no longer really have to worry about that spontaneous combustion part because there's nothing organic breaking down to produce that heat. However, I can say with a little bit of confidence because I've did it on a small scale, the smell. The smell will basically knock you on your butt. You got to do that in a very wide open, breezy area, or I mean, there's going to be irreparable brain damage from those fumes.
Well, I find that silicone always has that sort of, to me, it's a vinegary smell. I think it's the
Mm.
acetate. And then you mix that with a mineral spirit, and it is going to be pretty strong. I can see it getting to your head. It can probably make you feel fairly lightheaded and would have an issue. But I mean, sil nylon. I've got a few sil nylon products. Hard to beat it.
Oh no, I'm not
Uh,
saying anything bad about them. Good
yeah.
product. Just be aware that beeswax really won't seep into them that well, and you can't introduce the heat to allow them to soak in because nylon, still nylon, doesn't do well with heat. So you have to
One,
kind of go. Sorry.
I was gonna say one of my favorite tarps by far is my sil nylon tarp. Uh, it's just a fun tarp to get out, and it is lightweight, and it's I look for excuses to use it and play with it, and sometimes it does get taken just to play with, because I don't have a practical use for it this trip, but I'm going to take it anywhere. So I'll set it up. It'll be our our group shelter, or we'll just try because it has the one I have has weird tie outs, and we'll just try something different. Uh,
For a product like that, if you don't want to do the silicone and mineral spirits and stuff like that, they do make a lot of pre-made products that you can buy right at your big box marts like Canadian Tire and Walmart. Come in an aerosol can, you can spray it on. It's generally silicone based, and they're not bad products.
I don't
The
know.
spray on stuff, my tent. Every year that I'm going to use it, I take it outside. I put it up, let the wrinkles and stuff get out of it, let some air get through it, and then once it's aired for a few hours, I basically empty an entire can of just tent waterproofing straight from Canadian Tire, Walmart, wherever I happen to be at that day, onto it because it's a tent. It's an expensive tent. It's like an Ozark or whatever it is. Nothing fancy. Don't get me wrong. Just a little tent for Mel and I. But I keep hammering it to it. I actually got seam sealer. Once again, you can generally pick that up at the box marts. The product quality is box mart quality. If you go to some place like Mech or even do a little bit of research on Amazon, you can get some better products for seam sealing and things like that. And just, yeah, do your seam sealing, do your waterproofing. They're both synthetic materials, going on synthetic materials. They bond well, creates a real nice waterproof bond. And I have no problems. And if anybody's wondering, because I have gotten this question asked before, and maybe there's different thoughts out there, and I'd like to hear from you guys, and if Ben's still listening, I'd get his thoughts. Do you waterproof the inside and outside of your tent? As a rule, as far as I know, you're supposed to just do the outside. So do the outside, try to avoid your screen areas. So take your rain fly off, waterproof the bottom section off it, let that air for a little bit. Then I take my rain fly, throw it back on, and then re-waterproof the rain fly. Let that air out, and I try to give it a nice 24 hours to dry before I ever consider rolling it back up and putting it away. Yeah, I figured that's what you went to get, Ben, with some seam sealer there.
Yeah. So this is stuff I've had for a little while, and I think just feeling it, I think it's starting to go hard. Yeah, it's definitely starting to go hard.
Once again, a small drawback, and I do say small drawback because it takes a very long time. Synthetic materials will generally dry out over time. As were beeswax, things like that, you throw it in a Ziploc bag, it's pretty much going to last the life of you in that bag. You know what I mean?
But yeah, no, I mean these you can buy good products, and they're worth buying. You buy the good products, they're worth buying. They work well. You can buy a lot of good repair kits too. I have, and I was looking for it. I thought it would have been in that pile, but it must be in the other one. Uh, for sil nylon and polyurethane, polytarp urethane coating, PU tarps. You can buy good repair kits, and you can basically you put some of that sealer onto it. And the other one I've had, and I'm trying to remember the name of it. It was right on the tip of my tongue. It's like a tape. You can buy a tape you put on.
Mm. I've never
And
used the tapes, never had any experience with them myself. Um, but I do know the product you're talking about. I just can't think of it
yeah,
either.
I've bought it for people before because I've had to.
But yeah, at the end of the day, an important point to take away from some of this is that most of your materials are going to break down into synthetic and naturals, and your waterproofing is going to break down into naturals and synthetics as well. Generally, and I do say generally because not all things are created equal, synthetics stay with synthetics and naturals stay with naturals. They just tend to meld better. Not saying that it won't work for the other, but as a general rule of thumb, that's a pretty good way to keep things. So keep your natural things like your linseed oil, your paraffin wax, which is kind of synthetic. I get that. But your beeswax and stuff like that, keep it to your natural materials because they'll soak in, they require heat. Your your synthetics are going to need something that doesn't need heat. And as well as whatever you're using for your cutting agent, if you're using one like mineral spirits, make sure that it's not going to eat the material you're putting it on. So don't use acetone thinking, oh great, it dissolves the silicone stuff amazingly, and then you paint it on your Nysil tarp and all of a sudden your tarp is no more kind of deal. So it's always worth doing a little test section too, just to be sure, 100% sure. Like I never, well, that's a lie. With the iron cloth, I did just dunk it in and hope for the best, but I was into it for like $30 and I didn't care how it came out. I just wanted to see how it worked. But now a sill tarp, you spend $100 on a sill tarp and you're just going to hit it with some homemade concoction. Definitely try a little corner and make sure it's not going to ruin your $100 tarp on you.
I sent you the name of the tape. It was Tenacious Tape, and I've used that, and it's actually been quite good. And if you have the Sil Nylon tarps and stuff, I highly recommend you look that product up and carry a small roll with you. I did send it to you on your messenger. I don't know if you want to flick it up or not.
Yep, just trying to set it up here.
The nice thing with that stuff is it's usually a ripstop material, and it has that, it's an adhesive meant for that. And I've talked to people who've used it for small holes in their tarps and tents, and they say it lasts quite a while, and it's fairly easy to put on. And you get multiple colors, so you can usually match it pretty close. Whites, greens, browns. I think that's a green one up there.
And I mean, it's not overly expensive either. $10.51. Yellow, gray, black, clear. If you're really in a pickle there, and you can get double rolls for not a lot more. You know what I mean? So fairly inexpensive, not a bad thing.
My wife just got attacked by a bird.
Oh no, the chickens. Speaking of which, if anybody didn't notice, we did do an episode on pest control a few weeks back there. How are the chickens making out now, Ben?
The chickens are doing a lot better. I've definitely spent a lot more time and effort trying to protect them. So we updated the roof. We put automatic doors in. We've been testing that. I found one that I'm pretty pleased with off Amazon. Not that we used it fully stock. As I think anyone who knows me knows, I want to up anything I can. So I did sort of build a structure around it so that when the door is closed, all you can get to is the door. They can't get to the machine or anything. And yeah, they've been doing really well. So I have 9 out there again, and I got 3 more to go out in another few weeks. Want to bring one over?
We are getting to the end of the episode, so this is the time to start. There we go.
Much better looking than me, I know.
I mean, we'll use anything as a mascot now. So, I mean, why not? A chicken is not a bad animal. Comes home to roost, comes home to eat, can do well in the wild. It's a perfect, absolutely perfect mascot for us right now. But
it's really good to test out foods too, because these guys will eat absolutely anything. So as I've been out there looking at plants and stuff, I have. I mean, I don't
doesn't want to leave you.
Don't I don't put them at risk in the least. But I'll look at a plant and then I'm more tempted to say, well, is it edible at all? And then I'll go online, I'll do research and say, can it hurt chicken? So I'm identifying a few more local plants. And there's a lot of local plants that I'm getting better and better at identifying just because I have these guys here and I want to make sure they're safe and well protected. So I've picked out a few product or not products, few plants around my yard that I can feed them. And man, it is fun to watch them devour entire plants. So,
But in any case, that was our little tangent there. But yeah, waterproofing. I think we've talked a lot about the important points that we wanted to hammer there, Ben, unless you got something that we're missing out on this. Do you have anything on your notes that we glossed over and should loop back to?
no, I think you covered a lot of it with what you said. Like, I mean, natural products, things like beeswax and that should be more or less treated with natural products, and man-made products with man-made products treatments is a good thing. If you want to know more, research your particular product and what products are available. If you have questions, concerns, queries, and comments, and you want to reach out to us, we're more than happy to give you advice. At best, it's advice from our research, and if you're not happy with it, we're sorry.
I mean, all we can do is tell you what's worked for us and what hasn't worked for us and the experiences we had. That doesn't make us experts. That just means we've tried it. We can tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly that we've experienced, and somebody else could give you something else. That's why we always recommend that everybody goes out and does as much researching as possible, especially if it's something you're going to commit to and you're going to be using it as a piece of wilderness gear and you potentially trusting your life to this stuff. I mean, it's one thing to jump online and listen to Ben and I or anybody else, but get a good pool of information and make an educated decision on your own. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, it's you and your gear out in the woods, and you want to know, or at least have some faith in what you got out there. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah. But no, the end result is you want to keep yourself, as I said before, I think it was clean and dry as the words I used. And they really do go hand in hand. If you're wet, you get dirtier quicker. It just makes you miserable. So, try to keep yourself dry. You have a lot of products out there and you have a lot of materials out there. You have your backpack, you have your tarp, you have your sleeping system. We can talk about overall drying. We talk more about the waterproofing of those things. A lot of products we get are already going to be somewhat water resistant. The only thing we didn't mention that I kind of had in my notes was sort of like a little cheat side thing is Tyvek. Great little product. It's available at your hardware store. You can buy a roll of this stuff. I think you can buy a pretty big roll for $100, and it will pretty well last you a lifetime. And you can make your ground sheets from it. You can make tarps out of it. Guys just throw it in the dryer to soften up because it's loud, like almost like moving tin when it's fresh. You know what I mean? Like that whoop 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 noise. So that's a good cheap waterproofing method. And I've even seen people, because you can buy a Tyvek tape, make like ponchos and stuff out of it. So it's just a sort of an idea, something if you want to get out there and redneck it might be the product for you. The only downside is everything you're going to see is pretty well going to be the one color, and it's going to have the word Tyvek across it. And there are similar products or alternate products that are along the same lines. Just something to think about if you're looking for that budget option.
And as Ben said at the start of this, if you're looking to get into some budget bushcrafting options with some of your own DIY on there, you had mentioned like the cotton drop sheets and stuff like that. Sometimes you can pick those up at the dollar store. And then you can try some of these waterproofing methods and see what you like. Like the drop sheet's going to work with the paraffin wax. It's going to work with the beeswax. It'll even work with the silicone, honestly, because don't think you can't use the synthetic materials on natural materials and vice versa. It just may not work as well, but it's definitely something to experiment with. And it's something I would really like to do in the future is potentially get some drop sheets and some old cotton sheets and try a couple different waterproofing methods, do a video on that, and do some durability testing and things like that. So hopefully that'll be coming in the future as time allows and money allows and all that good stuff. Anyway, I think that's it for me tonight.
I got one last possibility. Let's just try something a little different. And I'm springing this on you. If it upsets you, you can beat me up later. How about we try this? A vote for the show for next time. My suggestion, and I want you to come up with a suggestion on the fly and putting you on the spot. My suggestion is places for budget bushcraft gear for the next episode.
Like places to find budget bushcrafting?
Yeah.
All right. Let's carry on with the theme and go with producing high-cost items on a low-cost budget.
Okay. So those are the two options. Where do you buy budget bushcraft gear, or how do you produce budget bushcraft gear at a low budget? I mean, similar theme, but two totally different angles. So what we're going to ask is for you guys to reach out to us, vote, and let us know what you want to see next week. And we will try to tally that up, and whatever seems to get the most interest through the various means that people converse with us, we will look at that for next week.
I like it.
Cool.
So I will post a poll up on the Facebook page if I can figure that out. If not, it'll just be a general post and people can comment, because I am not exactly the most techie guy on the planet when it comes to Facebook.
Go on with you. You're way better than I am.
Nah, well, one of us will figure it out. All right. I like the idea, though.
Cool. See y'all next week. Get out there and have fun.
Have a good night, everybody.